Hello, I'm Chris Flischer, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore concepts that allow us to broaden our view of the world. You'll hear interesting topics, meet fascinating guests, and discover who you really are. Using the time-tested practices of astrology, you'll learn how to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Astrology, art, and spiritual adventure on Turning of the Wheel TV with Chris Flischer. Hello and welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My name's Chris Flischer. As you know, this is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. That's the key word for today, because we have another great session with my friend Marianne Costarella, who's going to talk to us about an ordinary deck of cards. The household playing cards hold great wisdom, regardless of how you may think. It's not just about playing poker. It's not about playing war or pinochle or any other card game. This is about your destiny. These cards possess the destiny. Each of us has a specific card in the deck based on our birthday. And those cards are reveal our real true purpose. And it's fascinating to have you back on again, Marianne.
Thank
we had
you.
a great
Good to
time
be
last
here.
time. Yeah, we had a great time last time learning about this fascinating divination tool. And we talked a little bit last time about the suits, obviously. And I'm wondering, because you mentioned the hearts as being 52, you mentioned the clubs being 131, 133, the diamonds being 131,
right,
and the spades being 49. So out of the 365 days of the year, you would logically think that we would take 4 suits, divide 365 by 4, and we come up with an even number, but we don't. We have differences in that weight of those. So the cards, the suits that have the lower number seem to have more impact than those of the higher number, correct? So the hearts seem to be a little bit more weighty, and the spades a little bit more weighty as well, correct? Because of their placement?
Correct. I mean, I think certainly it depends on how you define impact. You know, a club and a diamond may take quarrel with that. However, I mean, because the club's communication and knowledge is their strong suit, as we would say. The diamonds, financial value, self-esteem, value. How am I increasing my self-value or self-worth on the plane? So I would agree with you that yes, the heart in the sense of feelings and emotions and compassion and all of the things that we were taught, hopefully taught of as children. And then the spade, what meaning am I here for? What is my lesson? Why am I here on this plane? What am I supposed to leave? What is my legacy? So those are the serious questions of those particular suits.
So they do all have weight.
They all have weight.
Right.
And yes.
And do you find people who have left an impact on the world in some capacity, say like an Abraham Lincoln or a Franklin Roosevelt, do they have a particular, do their cards resonate more? And I don't want to put you on the spot, you may not know their birthdays, but you know, do they have a particular character that aligns them with the suit?
No, not necessarily. I mean, certainly we know that Abraham Lincoln, February 12th.
Right.
So he was the king of clubs.
Oh.
King of diamonds. So he, in the king place, he obviously wore the royal crown.
So it's a king, anybody who was a king for their birthday is a level of prominence of some sort?
That's correct.
Or importance?
Yes, depending on the suit.
Depending upon the suit, of course, yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, when we look at the cards, we had talked a little bit offline about this, how the cards, individual suits also represent a stage of development.
Yes.
So that mankind, or humankind, since the beginning of time, when the cards first came into placement, that they have a certain, so like there's a heart period, and there's a club period, and so forth. And when does this all begin, and how long do those periods last?
Well, the heart period begins when a baby is born into its family of origin, and really essentially from 0 to 13 years old is the heart period, because that child is growing up in a family where essentially what it's being taught and what it is also teaching the family, even though the family thinks it's always just the other way around.
No, it's very symbiotic.
Is symbiotic, is that they're both being taught spontaneity, allowance of emotionality, creativity.
Boundaries. Yeah,
right?
how far they can get away, what they can get away with, yeah.
Compassion. Sharing, cooperation.
All basic human tenets.
All human, heartfelt.
Yeah,
yes.
right, interesting.
Absolutely.
And then as they hit adolescence, that very challenging age for anybody who's had an adolescent
yes.
knows that that's a challenging time because they start to flex their weight and their muscles.
That's right. And become a club, so to speak. And so then that club is wanting to dominate the heart and wanting to not feel, as we complain, that adolescents isolate or they step away from the family system.
They do withdraw.
And they do withdraw.
And how long does that period last?
Well, essentially ages 13 through 26.
Okay. So that's sort of right around the time that the Saturn return would come into play in astrology. Yeah, which is a very also, and then beyond that we go to the diamond period.
Yes. So, and that is when most young people are wanting to manifest what they've learned, whether it have been in trade school, in earth school, in college, wherever. Now, show me the money, let me go out there, and in a Martian sort of way, let me show you all what I've learned.
Right. So that's when they start having their babies, they buy
That's
houses, they get their careers, they graduate college.
Exactly.
Those big sort of milestone markers. Again, tying into that, what is the equivalent of the Saturn return in astrology.
Yes.
And then and that lasts how long?
And then that lasts through from age 26 through age 39.
And then from that point on, you're sort of wrapping up the show.
Right, exactly, you are.
With the spades.
With the spade.
I see.
Yes, absolutely, yep.
And
looking through the rear view mirror.
Looking through the rear view mirror. And of course, and that makes sense as you look at life because you're sort of, you're a composite of your experiences. As you walk down that road, you have a greater tool chest from which to draw. Your experiences are built on those sort of events.
Correct.
Yeah, interesting. When you look at and when we look at, say, if we look at this through a historical lens, and we think of it in terms of, say, the illumination of mankind, for example.
Yes.
How does that play into, do the cards have a significance into the sort of the unfolding of humanity and society? Like, do the hearts represent, the Greek period or whatever? Do they have an overall significance in that way?
I think they, macro, so you were asking me, we've just been talking for each individual person, each individual soul. It's been more of a microcosm, but now your question speaks more
to the macrocosm
of the world. And so on that level, yes, I think the cards bring a lot of meaning and a lot of significance in the sense that, as I said, no civilization can claim them. They go back to the beginning of time. And in that beginning of time, when mathematicians and psychologists, who we may not consider today as having been to formal psychology school, but the way they studied the character of the earth and of people was through the playing cards, through astrology, through numerology. So their psychologies in those ancient times were what we now look at and think, oh, what silly nonsense. Okay.
Interesting.
So, that time period when the cards were being taught in the ancient temples and this brotherhood called, it was a secret brotherhood of priests and priestesses that was called the Order of the Magi. So if we think of the coming of the Magi, the Order of the Magi, these high priests and priestesses, of which Jesus Christ was thought to have been one of these brilliant mathematicians who understood the mechanics, the mathematical mechanics of the universe and how it all worked. And so those mechanics were taught to the students that were willing to learn that. And then as those systems continued to evolve, we moved evolutionarily from the ancient temples and civilizations into the gypsies, using the cards as black magic and fortune telling.
Fortune telling,
right? And they were considered to be the magic or the wisdom of those ages.
Well, they were also cast in a sort of an evil light as well.
Yes.
Sort of dark-sided.
Dark.
Yeah.
Shadowy, kind of, yes, absolutely.
Using a divination tool which was sort of, had a cult sort of hook to it.
That's absolutely correct. And you know, I don't know how it lost its light from the temples and then moved into the gypsy black magic place, but it, you know, that did happen historically. And then as we continue to move around the evolutionary wheel, we see that we, not only the United States, but I would say most cultures today in this day and age, we are stuck in that part of the wheel, to use your term, so to speak, that is focused on gambling and entertainment.
Yeah, that's very
So we
accurate.
have now figured out, in a creative sort of a way, as a child would, how to use these things, okay, in a gamey kind of a way, so that I can make money from them, so I can gamble. And people are not, certainly because they're not aware, like I wasn't before I was fortunate enough to have found this system, or the system found me, was not aware that these were never meant to be played with. These had a more sacred purpose to them. And so now that we are stuck in this place of giving to get, or using a deck of cards to make money, or to occupy and amuse my mind, not in a way that gives me any real meaning or significance, but more in a way that, you know, just plays with my head for a period of time.
Right. So that would also, I would think that there would be a period of time when that was applicable, and it seems as if we look at this historically, we would see that that is the case. We can see that there has been a sort of reshaping of the game of money, for sure. We've
Yes.
seen that historically in the recent times. That also speaks astrologically in alignment as well. But it also points to an evolutionary period of time where we move beyond that into a place where when money becomes less important. And it's sort of like Maslow's hierarchy, where we sort of start out in the very root causes of looking for food, clothing, shelter, then we work our way up. And once we've satisfied a number of different levels with our evolution, we can now open our mind to the place where we expand more and seek out a greater sense of purpose, meaning, value, looking around the world, seeing where, and that's, do you think that's accurate with our...
I very much would agree with you, and I think that's where we're moving with this system of cards, this system of divination, because the intent is for it to be used, again, as it had been used in the very beginning of time, as a sacred system that is to be used by science, not just spirituality, but science as a tool to illuminate mankind.
It's that fascinating place where science and spirituality meet, which I think that hopefully in our lifetime, and it will come to a point where we can see that, because they're really at odds with each other in some cases, even though they're closely enmeshed. Now, in the last segment, we had talked a little bit about the cards. Every one of us, by the way, has a card. We all have a card based on our birthday. And you're one of 4 suits, and you're a card based on your birth time. And the way to find that out is to seek out someone like Marianne and to figure out what that card is. Because what that card is incredibly revealing to you as an individual, who you are, much the way astrology will tell you what is going on in your life. These cards have that same value. I know that for a fact because I have been witness to it. I have seen it manifest itself in my own life. And I think that the stages of man, sort of the seasons that you represent with these suits, are very applicable for that. And as we, obviously as we age, we're going to have more experience. Hopefully we've learned our lessons somewhere along the line, and that it would make sense. But for a person to understand their card, is that going to enable them, validate for them, or prevent them from living their purpose?
I mean,
Probably
it's
all of the
certainly
above.
all of the above, and it depends on the individual who is consulting the cards and how they use the significance of the cards. But I think they are meant clearly to be guideposts, to almost be driving the car with the headlights on, so to
Right,
speak,
right.
so that you have a sense of where you're going.
But not clear, not complete clarity.
Not complete clarity.
But a
as
good
I-
idea, a good
That's
direction, right.
I mean, I think when we signed up to come to this plane, we didn't sign up for complete clarity. I mean, I think that we signed up for a certain amount of having the lights off at times.
Well, I think that's part of the whole human condition. It's a question of trial and error. It's
Yes.
you put your fingers in the fire when you're young, it burns, and
That's right.
you don't do it again. And that is the whole process of accumulated knowledge through the course of time, and the passage of time. Yeah, and it's interesting that the cards, and yet the cards, you say, we spoke about this last time. They've been around for so long, and they are representative, and yet we don't realize this. I remember one time. Several years ago, I was living in Washington, D.C., and I went to see somebody who actually read my cards back then. The same person was in Washington, D.C., who was also consulted by a member of the royal family of England. Flew across to see this person. This is how well this person was known.
Wow.
And fascinating sort of story, but I don't want to get off the subject there. But I asked the question, so can people ask questions of the cards the way they would
absolutely.
the way they would a tarot? And get a draw on a card, or would you fan out a deck of cards and say pick a card and then?
I mean, I could do that, but I mean that is, in terms of the readings that I would give, the cards have already been dealt, so to speak, for every human being on this plane of existence. So, in that they've already been dealt, and that I have the software, if you will, in this day and age, for that predestined deal. And so if you were to come to me and just tell me your date of birth and the year, I could put you into a database in my software and be able to tell you what this year of your life is going to be about. So this year is your chapter. So whatever chapter it is, so let's say you are 38, this would be the 38th chapter of your life. And on the date of your birth, until the following year, the day previous to your date of birth, those cards will essentially affect your life in all different areas. So,
But we still have free will within that realm.
Yes, we do.
So
Absolutely.
a card may put you into a neighborhood, but maybe not tell you which house to go to.
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean,
so that's where free will comes into. Or it may put you into in astrology, I always use the term theme. I say, well, if you're in a money theme, then you might be dealing with money as a concept. And money as a concept can be money coming, it can be money going, it can be money spent, it can be money invested, it can be money in any, but it's still the topic of money.
That's right.
So the cards on any given year would give you that guidance towards that theme that you're looking for, that you're working towards.
It's an advisory sort of guidance.
And if you used it in your own life?
Absolutely.
And have you found that the synchronicity or the accuracy is there?
Is absolutely there, beyond any other system I've ever used.
Do you think that you subconsciously live up to that, or would you do a forward look or a backwards glance at the cards?
I've done both.
Okay.
I've done both. And there are times that I cannot necessarily see in a forward look, but I certainly can see with tremendous amount of clarity in a backward glance.
Because I was worried about the idea of self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, if you sort of say, this is going to be a great year for money, and that sets the stage for someone going out and saying, oh, someone told me it was a great year for money, I'm going to make lots of money, but, or they may lose lots of money. Does that self-fulfilling prophecy sort of tilt the outcome?
Again, I would go back to the individual soul. It would depend on how that soul utilizes that prophetic reading. I mean, I think that, you know, what is that person's relationship to money? How do they have a conservative relationship with it? Do they have an excessive, you know, and I think, again, it depends on who that person is, why they're consulting you about money in their life at that point. I mean, and this is where, you know, I think sometimes my sense of psychotherapy and individual psychology, I can integrate that with the reading and bring the two together.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I really wanted to ask about that because you're a fully licensed psychotherapist, and so you obviously are dealing with the realm of the mind, the emotions, the individual, the sort of the flowering of the individual from a very sort of almost analytical, scientific standpoint. And yeah, you enter into the realm of the esoteric and
Right.
sort of, but the two really substantiate each other.
They really do. And this is an esoteric science. And there would be those that would believe you can't put the word esoteric and science in the same sentence. But this is an esoteric science, and no less valid than any pharmacological science that we have in today's world.
Now, how is that met within the world of your profession?
It's certainly within the medical model world of my profession, probably not well. I don't think that insurances would reimburse
Oh, right. Of course, yeah.
for, you know,
A bad spade card.
right, exactly.
Right.
Absolutely. But I think certainly within my private practice, within the individual, the anatomy of the individual client that comes to me, if I sense that there is an opening within them to want to integrate additional tools like the metaphysics, if I explain to them that psychology is the study of the soul and not the study of behavior, as most psychologists believe it is.
Interesting. Very good distinction. Yeah. You know, really what it does is it allows you to paint a more substantive picture of the individual. You get far more depth. You get more granularity. And it's almost like if you're a carpenter, you come into a house with a toolbox. You've got hammers and chisels and screwdrivers, everything else in there. So you pull out a certain tool for a certain application.
Yes.
I think in many ways the cards, much like astrology, allow us to bring in a different tool for a different period of time. And it has that ability, but you need all the tools.
You need all the tools. Human beings are like mosaics, and in order to...
Very complex.
You know, very complex. And like a quilt, you need to take a thread from here, and a thread from here, and a thread... You know, there's just so many different places. A cigar is not just a cigar, and a human being has a lot of complexity, as you well know, studying the science of astrology and
Right. It's interesting. You know what I find fascinating about it? I know what my card is. I'm not going to tell it yet right now, but Marianne and I both have the same cards, which is sort of a unique coincidence in itself, or not. And I know that as a very young child, I had certain curiosities about certain things, which now, as I look back with that backward glance, I can see clearly makes sense that I am where I am today. However, at the time, I would not have known that. I would have said, gee, I've got big thoughts, I think a lot, but I'm not who I think I am at the time. But through the course of my life's experiences, those have brought me to a place based on that pathway, which I apparently chose,
Right.
which allowed me to arrive at a spot.
That's right.
And so would someone who has a baby, for example, turn to a card, a birthday card, as an example of what their child might be, the way they would, say, an astrology chart?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. That baby was born on a particular day and chose that particular birthday to have a particular sort of relationship with its parents, with itself. I mean, those parents were not randomly chosen, I do not believe, and that, you know, this circle of family that is created when a child comes into it completes in many ways the psyche, the search for relationship. And so as that child brings heart into the family of that relationship, what do the parents learn? What does the child learn from those parents? And also, what do those parents learn, obviously, from that child?
Yeah, it does work both ways. There's no
Yes.
question about it.
Yes.
Do you find that you're able to recognize people from their cards, or recognize can you identify a person and?
I mean, I can't necessarily look at a person, but I can certainly, if I spend time with a person, it may be easier for me to differentiate between the fact that they could be a heart or a club.
Right.
Or,
I mean,
you
when
know.
we first met, you said, I could tell something was going on. I
Right.
could tell that you have
Yes.
a certain, and I could, whatever it was.
We have similar wiring. you
Similar
know.
wiring, that's a good way of
Right.
looking at it, right? Yeah.
Right, we do.
A similar lens we're looking through.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you ever found that people have a certain card and they don't live that destiny, or they don't know their birthday and they can't identify their card? Or do you ever see those sort of, mix-ups where it becomes easy to validate? I know in my own experience with astrology, I've had experiences where people gave me the wrong birth time. I did a reading and they said that's totally wrong. Then they found their proper birth time. I was able to reread them and it was completely validating.
Okay.
So in that capacity.
In that capacity, I mean, I don't need that much specificity to do a card reading. All I need is the date of birth, so time and place don't enter into it.
Right.
And so that, I guess, perhaps facilitates, that process a little bit more. I certainly have met a lot of people who are lost in terms of finding out who they are.
And does the card provide guidance?
And the card absolutely provides guidance in the sense that people say, oh, that's why I am this way, or oh, that's why my husband is this way, or that's so.
So that raises a good question. If a person is lost and they are looking for guidance in their life, and many people are lost because of marriages that have gone awry, or jobs they've lost, or people who've left their lives for whatever reason, does the card validate that, or does the card provide them a way or a means to sort of rectify that? I mean, sort of, correct whatever the mistakes have been made.
Well, I mean, it's certainly, I believe the card will validate that happening, so I could go back in the reading of that particular year or a year before or whatever and find out when that circumstance may have happened. And I think by providing people with more insight into who they are, that they can then bring that additional insight back into either a new relationship or back into reconciling the old relationship and understanding.
Sort of a redirection of the energy.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
so
right.
that's something that's interesting about, as people have asked me that about astrology. They say, can I change my chart? And I say, no, you can't really change your destiny. What you can do is redirect it, meaning that you can channel it in a different way.
Yes. Very definitely, absolutely, and that's where the free will comes in, and the decision that with this card come inherent strengths and inherent weaknesses. So now, what would I like to do if I wasn't really specifically aware of what my weaknesses are? But now, as a result of having my cards read and understanding where my liabilities lie, what do I want to do about them? And what can I do about them? And am I willing to recognize that those liabilities speak to perhaps some of the failures in my relationships?
Or that the liabilities in astrology are always where we find the difficulties, but that's where we find the growth.
That's right. Very much so. And again, now we're speaking to another area where certain people, perhaps spades and hearts, and probably all the suits for that matter, are more interested in a spiritual, psychological growth. Not everyone is. Some people are more interested in financial growth. Some people are more interested in...
This is a motivation you're talking about.
Yes.
What
motivation.
Yeah. What gets people out of bed in the morning?
That's right.
Yeah, what's
your value system?
Right.
What do you value? And the suit defines what you value. So, I mean, does this suit you?
Yeah, all those words. I mean, when you think about the metaphors and we talk about in daily life, all the terms that we use and bandy about certainly do play out. Play out.
They play out, exactly.
I mean, the puns are there for the taking.
That's right. What's your deal?
What's the deal?
What's the deal?
But I mean, I think that when someone says I was dealt a bad card, or that's the card I was dealt, I mean, it sounds like a victim kind of quality or characteristic to it, but in some ways it may be unavoidable.
Unavoidable, and there may be some truth. And you were dealt that card
for a reason.
For a learning reason, exactly.
Absolutely, yeah. Wow. It's absolutely fascinating. We've been talking today with Marianne Costarella, and we're talking about an ordinary deck of cards, each of which signifies a birthday. Each of us has a specific card in that deck, and this is just an ordinary house of cards deck of cards that you have in your house somewhere, probably in a drawer somewhere. It's what you go to the gambling casino with. It's what you play poker with your friends. In that deck, there's a card. That card has meaning. I encourage you to seek out Marianne. Your Birthday is My Business is her Facebook page, which is a great tagline. I love it. Your Birthday is My Business, and you can find her there and determine what your card is, understand what your card is, get some granularity around that, and you'll be amazed at the amount of precision that's there, guidance, accuracy, and thought that's there. It's very fascinating. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Chris.
It's been great. I love these kinds of topics, so come back again.